Welcome to Talent Buzz, where I talk about talent acquisition in fast-growing SaaS companies. Today, I'm joined by Sofia Sundbom, Chief People Officer at BIMobject. And today, we are discussing the importance of onboarding your employees. How to do that one efficiently, how to get that one to the next level. And let's start today's episodes from what are the actual benefits of creating a great onboarding process.
I think there's two things that I would like to answer in this question. First of all, I think we spend so much time on finding the right candidate or like having a super nice recruitment process and experience for the candidate. And then when we have signed the contract and people have joined, then we are like celebrating, we spend a lot of time, and then we kind of forget that they don't know anything about the company, basically, and probably like not so much about the role. Even if you have had a customer success role before, you will do it slightly different in our company or like any company. So I think that is just having like focus on that and not losing focus on the candidate is super important. And then why onboarding as such is important, I think, is because from like what I see and also have experienced myself is you come into a company, and if you cannot get up and running and understand why you are at the company and also what your job is, then first of all it takes so much more time for you, and then you also have a really high risk of losing that person. So if you come in, you don't find your spot in the company, you don't understand what you're gonna do, then you're basically hired for nothing. So I think it's the onboarding process, maybe at the same place as the offboarding process is the most important process in the company. Because if you cannot get people into the company and up and running, then you will just create more problems later on. So it's a really nice way of being proactive.
Yeah. And as someone, for example, I'm personally, I love numbers, and I think everything from point of numbers. But if we really look at the business impact of having great onboarding, I think everyone can calculate with their own numbers. Let's take an example that kind of with a proper onboarding, the person who joins your company, they will become profitable, let's say not in 6 months, but in 4 months, because the onboarding is better, or because onboarding, they will success in the work, and therefore they will stay, let's say 20% longer than they would with bad onboarding. So I think the business impacts over there are very big.
Yeah, definitely. And like a super simple example, and I guess it's kind of similar in your company as well, is that if you hire a salesperson and that person starts signing deals after 4 months or 3 months instead of 6 months or 7 months, that makes a huge impact, of course. And it's really, really difficult for someone to join a company, especially ours, that's quite technical, and sell something that they don't understand. So I really agree. And I think that is sometimes we perhaps focus a little bit too much on the employee experience in the onboarding. I mean, that's a super important part of it as well, but also having that other aspect in mind, which, I mean, of course, contributes to the employee experience, because you have obviously joined somewhere because you want to do a good job, and you get frustrated if you don't get the right tools or lessons or whatever to understand that. But I think that is like also a part of the equation that we forget about. I also love numbers, and so we measure a lot of different things.
Exactly. One question that I'm sure when I'm asking this right now, I think your answer might be different from mine, but let's see. Like, where do you believe that onboarding starts? What is the first step of onboarding? Like, where does onboarding start?
I think it starts when you sign the contract. I mean, I think you could argue that it starts even before, but I think for me it starts, or we have tried to see it like when you sign the contract. That is when the pre-boarding and then the onboarding starts. And I think many people nowadays talk a lot about pre-boarding. I think that's super important, and also a way to just make sure that people have a nice feeling, a gut feeling when they get into the office or open up their computer their first day if they're working remote. Where do you think that onboarding starts?
I think actually onboarding starts in employer branding already and in the recruitment process. And why I think this way? I think kind of everything that happens there, it's a lot about kind of setting a person for success. And well, if I give just an kind of actual example, for example, we have a podcast regarding working at Talent B. And where the idea for that one came actually was when we onboarded our first employee, Nea. We thought about kind of what kind of different formats we should have for onboarding, and we kind of decided that, hey, it's good to have sessions together, something to study by herself. And then we were like, hey, maybe podcast could be actually fun idea. Like, hey, in the morning she could go for a walk outside and listen about our sales process or our culture or our ideal customer profile or stuff like that. But then the more we thought about the idea, we thought that let's make it public. So like, why only publish that one for our employees? But hey, let's make it public, kind of our employer branding content. And now actually a lot of people who are in our recruitment process already, they are kind of listening to that podcast. It is super valuable information for them. But at the same time, it is kind of pre-onboarding them for the role. And what we have seen is that most of the time when we hire people, like our kind of time to hire is quite long. So typically those people have been following our brand for a long time on social media, and they actually know a lot about our ways of working already. And I kind of believe that is, I'm not sure if the right word is onboarding or pre-onboarding, or how do you describe that? But I think that there's kind of a lot of stuff you can do there already.
That's very true. You're onboarded before you even start. I think the career page also plays a important role in that, to make sure, because if someone come in with and the interviews as well, of course, if you come in with another kind of angle or with other perspectives than we then present in the onboarding, then we have a big problem. And that is like, we ask always, we have an evaluation form in the end of the onboarding to make sure that people like can express what they thought, and we can also then pair that with how they actually performed as well. But we always ask them 2 questions where we ask like, okay, so if in your recruitment process, what could we have done differently? And in the onboarding, what could we have done differently? Because those, and like together, those questions are quite powerful. Because then you can see if you would listen to the podcast and then you come in and you're like, but you said that you worked like this, and now you present like to me this sales process instead. Like, what is this? So, but I think that's a really good approach, and also a way to onboard people before they even start.
Yeah. But it's interesting you mentioned the kind of feedback. I personally believe that collecting feedback on your onboarding process is super important. It is important for every company, but I think especially in like 2 cases. Like, first of all, when you are kind of just starting, because then you typically kind of create the first version of the onboarding, and there's like so many things you need to change after the first person has started. You learn so much. And at the same time, if your company is doing a big turnover or change in strategy or something like that, then typically your onboarding will be changing a lot as well. But can you share a bit more like on what kind of things you, for example, typically get feedback for your onboarding? Like, what are the things that kind of employees are giving feedback, like, hey, maybe focus more here or do this one differently or something like that?
Really, really good question. So I think I'll start by giving a little background on like how the company is set up. So we are like a global company. We have employees in North America and Europe, and we also we have also tried to recruit in groups, so having people start the same day, and that doesn't always work. So we have also like had people start a bit spread out from time to time. So, and then we have a few offices, but we also have a few people working fully remote. So we have tried really hard to find a balance and also a solution that works for everyone. So previously we had a lot of like full day sessions when we went through a lot of things, and then people were like, yeah, but this doesn't work really well when we are in 2 time zones, because half of the team that joins, they cannot join because they are asleep, or the other half then falls asleep when the other one is awake. And then so that was one thing that and also like the amount of information that you can take in the same day. So basically, before we try to squeeze a lot of things in the first week, and now we instead have looked at the onboarding journey as a longer process. So where we like spread out the different sessions, and we have gathered feedback. When I started 2 years ago, a little bit more, and I think this is actually exactly 2 years when we implemented the onboarding process. So then in the beginning, I had interviews with everyone who did the onboarding to like really get a lot of qualitative feedback as well. And now we just do the evaluation form, and then occasionally having interviews as well. I think it's important to keep doing that. But what many people say is that it's really we have a quite structured like intranet with an onboarding page. So people say that is a good thing to have that always to return to. And also that the onboarding process that we have set up now is quite heavy on the heavy focus on interacting with other people. So you have your buddy that's there for you. We can, of course, always do better in how we work with the buddy and the new employee. But that's one thing that pops out, and also that the information is quite structured. That we have, you start with like what are the core values, a little introduction to the company, so you can have something to build upon during the rest of your journey. So we don't just throw people into you're an SDR, so this is like you will only hear about what your pitch is and this, and don't care about the product. That's not so important, but this is the pitch. So we really try to build that broad knowledge from the start, and then almost like a little house. So we build up the floor and the walls and the roof, and then we make it easier for people to put in the sofa and put up the furniture in different rooms. So I think the information range, and also the focus on like getting started, getting to know people, and like this is your goals in the beginning.
Yeah. I think that's quite kind of typical mistakes that a lot of companies are making, really trying to kind of push the onboarding for too short period. And then kind of really when a new person starts, there's so much of new stuff coming up. And for example, we just had a kind of mistake around that one. So how we have built our onboarding, we have a project management tool called Monday, where we basically have the onboarding plan over there, checklist, everything you need to do. And with our newest colleague, Nora, we tried to do it a bit differently once again, like testing out new things. And we shared Nora the onboarding and was like, hey, you book the sessions. Like we didn't book the sessions, but ask her to book the sessions. And then we have a Slack channel called Fuck Ups. And then I think it was maybe 3 days or something. And then Nora shared there, like, you shouldn't book all the onboarding sessions within the first 2 weeks. Like way too much more like information, but rather thinking that the onboarding should be kind of longer. And I think the key over there really is like prioritization. Like what are the things you should be learning, within the first weeks? What are the things you should be learning within first month? And then like what are things you don't even need to know within, let's say, first 6 months of your journey in the company, and not trying to drown people with the information. So
no, and one thing that we have learned as well, building upon what you said, is like sometimes you have a really good session that you should have the first day or the second day or third day, but then to really like leverage that knowledge, you need to have a follow-up session in 6 months. And that we have been it sounds silly that I say we just realized that, but in some session we realized, okay, so when we talk about we have a quite technical session, which is super important to have in the beginning, but that one you can understand to 50% perhaps, or like 25%, and that is kind of the purpose of that session. But then we can do kind of the same session again, and then you will understand 75 to 100% after a while, when you have like really like when things have sunk in and you have more information and more knowledge. So I think that is also an important thing. Like, what did you learn during the onboarding that you have to relearn 6 months afterwards or a year afterwards? So, but we have also experimented a little bit with like setting the responsibility on the new joiners to book meetings versus like we are planning all the meetings from the start. And I think there's probably a balance to strike there.
Yeah, for sure. And if we think about kind of how to structure your onboarding process, I think there are maybe kind of three things I see. So there's kind of the skills you need. And I think the skills you could be maybe dividing on two different categories. So there's kind of the skills that everyone needs within the company. Those might be, understanding of your customers, understanding of your product and stuff like that. And then there's kind of skills that you need for that particular role. SDR, you need to know the pitch, or product marketer, you need to know how you're running marketing and so forth. And then maybe thirdly, kind of culture part. And I think skills are easy to teach, but culture is hard to teach. And I'm not sure, should you even be teaching your culture, or can you even do it? Or, can you say, well, you can say that, hey, here's our culture, here's our values. But I think every time someone joins your company, they are kind of changing their culture a bit and so forth. So how do you approach, onboarding people for your culture?
Interesting question. So I agree with you to a large extent. So I think you can of course say this is a few examples of how we act around here, and this is the core values, and a few examples of how you can live those is this and this and this. But I think the important thing is that the culture is visible in all the other sessions and the company as such. So when we have some of these sessions, that is where it's really important that the culture is visible. But I also think that the most important thing is to have a good hiring manager that will take care of the person, and also a buddy that can teach the new joiner the culture. So having, I don't think that you can sit place someone in a chair and then spend 2 hours teaching the culture, but rather having someone else showing and role modeling the culture and making sure that it's visible in the other sessions. Because and exactly as you said, you have probably hired someone because they have a culture ad, not a culture fit. So you also want that person to influence. And what we did, and maybe this is a little controversial, or maybe not that controversial, is that during the when we have just in December last year kind of pivoted our core values to be more specific, more specific towards our company. We had quite generic ones before, and then we also piloted them a little bit in the onboarding sessions. So talking broadly about what do we do, who are we working here, and this is a few words that could describe the culture, and then followed that up with them as well, and then of course combine with interviews with the rest of the organization. We could also find the real core values for the organization. So I also think that there is you shouldn't experiment too much with the new colleagues that you bring on board, but they are a clean slate. You are building you're painting the painting with them. So they also have a fresh perspective on many things.
Exactly. But you mentioned the kind of buddy over there, and I've heard a lot of companies having kind of working buddy in the beginning. My previous company had that one, but can you share a bit more on that one? How does it work? How do you choose who's going to be the buddy for the new person and so forth?
So we have had it for approximately 2 years, and it is the hiring manager that chooses the buddy. We sometimes give them some suggestions and advise them, but we try to have someone that is quite close in one way or another to the new person. So if you say that you would work in the DACH market, then we could choose one either at the same office as you would be, or someone working towards the same market. So you have at least one a connection point or interaction area, and then that person is. And the problem that person is trying to solve is also having someone that you can go to and ask the questions that you, even if you can ask your manager, maybe you would hesitate a little bit doing so because you have asked 2 million other questions. So having someone that you can spar a little bit more with, and also easier build an informal relationship with faster. So it's basically also one person that can I don't know, not hold you in the hand, but like walk a little bit with you in the beginning and ensure that, oh shit, now Sofia I can see that you're not invited to sofa time or town hall. I'll help you out with that. So someone who can, that you can shadow a little bit. And now we're working to either because what we have learned now during these 2 years is that system, and we have had it quite loosely structured also on purpose to understand what works and what doesn't work. That person and also in different roles is taking different doing different things and taking kind of on different parts of responsibilities. And now we're trying to structure that a little bit more to ensure that at least the hiring manager, the new joiner, and the buddy knows kind of who is doing what here, because that can differ a little bit. And generally speaking, and I think that's a learning that we have had from designing the whole onboarding, we are focused mostly now on the general onboarding, so not so much for the specific roles, but what does everyone need to know when they start here, and then what kind of body should everyone have when they start here. And now we have also started to look a little bit on, so how can we support the hiring managers in their specific onboarding journey when the general onboarding, or parallel with the general onboarding.
Yeah. And when we look at the kind of onboarding in a lot of companies, at least I feel like onboarding stays quite similar. So I think for a lot of companies, it's the same now than it will be in 1 year. But can you share a bit more? For example, if we use your kind of the general onboarding as an example, how do you really evaluate the success of that one, and kind of when do you know that, hey, okay, now we need to change something in this and really take it to the next level?
I think we have the opposite mindset that onboarding is never static. As soon as we have something, as soon as we add something, we think of when we will take it away, basically. So every onboarding round, we think of okay, so which sessions are perhaps outdated, which sessions what information do we need to add? Is it something that we talk about now that is basically a duplicate of something else? So we have a mindset where we realize, and I think that will be the case for many scale-ups and startups, of course, and SaaS companies in general, that as soon as, if you try to make something perfect that should be the same for 3 years, then you will sit and you will work a lot, you will create something that's super, super good for 2 months, and then something will change. So I think that is that's a learning that I've had, and also a mindset that we work with, that we are the onboarding will always evolve and will always change. And the good thing is that if you onboard someone in January, they will have a good experience with the onboarding. And then if you have changed a lot of things in April, when you onboard the next group of people or person, they will not know how the onboarding looked like in January. So it's also a quite easy group in that sense, because even if we are changing things, the people going through the process doesn't really notice. While, if you would change the way you do performance review or salary review or any other of the people processes or sales processes in general, then people will be tired and realize that okay, so now you have experimented with a lot of things and you're doing everything is new every time, but that's not the same with the onboarding. There you can add something or remove something without someone noticing.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And I think for us, one thing that has been working very well is when new person starts, I ask them to write down every question that they have kind of during their, let's say, first few months, because there is always a lot of questions. And then it's kind of interesting to see actually when you check out the list of the questions and you compare that one to your onboarding, hey, do I have sessions where I'm answering these questions? So that's interesting. But what do you think on kind of different formats of onboarding? And I think if I heard her correctly, what you kind of shared earlier was that you try to have a lot of sessions where your kind of current employees are teaching something. I think there's multiple benefits of that one. Of course, people getting to know each other and stuff like that. But do you think like that is something that will change in the future? Will there be different kind of formats for onboarding? Podcast, videos, let's say virtual reality, or kind of different formats for onboarding. What do you think on that?
Yeah, of course. I'm still curious. I think virtual reality have a lot of interesting application areas, but I don't. And I mean, I can of course see that be used in onboarding, but I haven't really I think we need to come come further with the rest of the society first before we apply that into the onboarding process. But I definitely like videos, and we are already now mixing quite a lot with recorded sessions and live sessions, things to read, because you also kind of, I think it's, we have passed the time when we spend so much time having one person presenting and 5 person calling in, just listening for an hour. Then it's better that you have a presentation that's perhaps recorded, you can listen to it whenever you like. That also helps with time zones. And then you can have other types of more meaningful interactions with that person. It's also difficult, or you don't get to know someone. If I take an example, I have the first session in the onboarding, which is welcome, this is our core values, this is the company, I don't know, 5 minutes about each department. But in that session, even if we have a few interaction and discussion moments in that, and we all of course introduce each other to each other and so on, they don't really get to know me in that session. So that part, I think we need to facilitate that in another way. And I think when doing that and realizing how we create those connections and that are more meaningful, then we will also go, and everyone will, towards more of a async onboarding process. So not everyone needs to do everything at the same time.
One interesting thing that might be coming, I'm sure, because I've been thinking about the videos a lot. And on my previous place, I tried that when I worked there as a head of sales, and I had an onboarding session for our kind of experts who weren't kind of doing selling, but they needed to know about our sales process and kind of what is expected from them to our sales. And I when I started there, I always had a one-on-one kind of session on that one. Then at some point, I tried to have a pre-recorded video and then a shorter call with them. But one thing that I've been thinking, could you combine actually your onboarding with your customer marketing? And what I mean by this is, for example, for us, when a new employer branding strategy starts at Talent B, and we want to kind of onboard them on our philosophy of employer branding, how we are doing that one. Could we actually do an online course regarding on our approach on employer branding, which we could utilize both on onboarding our people, but also maybe onboarding our customers, or use it in marketing materials or something. And then kind of eventually, when you use a lot of time on creating high quality content, you could actually utilize it for multiple groups of people.
And I think you're so right in that, and I think that's something everyone should do, because you have created the marketing material for other people to understand, so it is easily you have spent a lot of time, and it has a really high quality. So we do that a lot. Many of the videos or ebooks that you will find going into our website is also part of the onboarding. So definitely, and if it isn't good enough for your customers or your employees, it should be good enough for both. So that's a good. I also think it's interesting, and we haven't done that, but I just got reflected upon it when you talked, how you could also engage both the customers and the employees together in the onboarding. That would also be quite cool, and a way to also build retention internally and externally.
Yeah. I've been actually thinking about the exact same thing, that our onboarding should have hey, call 3 of our current customers and ask what they are buying from us, how they are seeing the cooperation, what kind of language they are using, and so forth. So that that might be actually super interesting. But hey, last question, and this might be a hard one. There's a book called Good to Great. What do you think? What is the difference between good and great onboarding? Like how to get from good to great? Like what are the differences there?
I think in order to get to great, you need to have good first. Because if you don't have good, how will you know what great looks like? And also I think, but that is also my approach to many things. If you start from 0, you will not reach 100. You will start by, and if you try to reach 100, you will never deliver anything. So I think you need to come to good first. And I think good is when you have the system accesses, they work. The person knows like, okay, so where should I be my first day? Like, how will my first day look like? And they will get like a basic understanding of the company. I think that's good. Like you don't have a lot of hiccups, like a quite smooth process, but there's like, it's a hygiene onboarding. So the most important things are in place. And then and it's probably like the same for everyone. I think that's also a good start to good way to start, because then you realize what works for product in this sense, what works for sales and what works for back office or DNA, and like what works for marketing. And then you can go to great when you can have a more customized, personalized onboarding process. I think that is, for me, that is what great is, when you can feel that I'm starting at this company, this is actually everything is relevant to me in different ways, and I can feel that this is designed for me. And being able to do that without the hiring manager or like the people team or whoever building a new onboarding process for each person, I think that is going towards great. So having making sure that it feels personalized, but the back end of it is still quite standardized.
Yeah, I think that's very good, and I think on kind of personalized for me, I think there's gonna maybe two parts of that one. I think having those different roles is of course one part of that one, but then I think like when we really go to excellent level, I think it also comes down to understanding the new hires' ways of learning. Let's say someone is better learning in reading, someone is listening, someone is doing. So when you can really get to that level, I think that's like excellent level already.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
For every company, there's lots to grow for sure.
Yeah, of course. And I think I think many companies have a quite good onboarding process, but everyone can become better. And if you don't have something, and which I think also is actually the case for many companies, especially in the early days, because you work so closely with the new joiner, and you are basically 10 people, and then when the 11th person comes in, it's someone who shadows you or someone who knows exactly what that person will do. I think there are like a lot of easy ways to get some kind of onboarding up and running. And also, speaking from my personal experience, when we started working on the onboarding, then we realized that we spent so much ad hoc time on like system access and things like that. And now we have worked really closely with the IT department, and they are a brilliant team. Now, like there's so much time that we're saving, both teams, on having that process automated, because now when we know how it works, then we don't need to spend time on that, and then we can spend our time on actually going like higher up from good to excellent ladder. So that was a key learning for me, to ensure that, like, because it's so easy to see the onboarding as like it's something that the people team is handling, and like the only people that they would interact with is of course the hiring manager and like the buddy, if you even have a buddy, but for like not including all the people who are presenting and especially the IT and the system part of it. I think it's that will just create problems for you later on. And frustration, because like when IT doesn't work, and like if you don't get access to your Gmail account or Salesforce or whatever, that is just like such a pain point in the employee experience. So So I think that is also like, if I would give advice to someone else who's designing their onboarding, new onboarding process, that is where I would look first. So what pain points do you have? Because if you create something that's great, with like different types of material, some is video, some is learning by doing, some is reading, but you still don't have the pain points solved, then people will not feel that it is a great onboarding journey. So first you need to get to some kind of ground zero, and then you can add things. So that's also what we're focusing on continuously. Like, where do we, by accident or as a trade-off, introduce new pain points, and how do we then remove them?
And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you got a lot of good ideas about SaaS talent acquisition. If you enjoyed the episode, feel free to share it on your social so others can hear it too. And if you have a topic in mind that you would like me to cover in this podcast, share it with me as well. I'm Samuli, CEO and co-founder in TalentBee, where we help fast-growing SaaS companies in their talent acquisition. Make sure to follow us, make sure to follow this podcast, and have an awesome week. Bye-bye.